you're kidding. You can see me, right? Be quiet. I can't see you, so it's fine. So, during the 36 years, or 37, that I've been teaching ceramics, we've used 30 tons of clay. In 1970, a VW Beetle weighed 1,850 pounds. A few years later, they weighed 1,900 pounds. Give or take a few pounds, I figured that we used enough clay, or the equivalent of 33 VW Beetles. Can you imagine carrying a beetle up the stairs? No. Okay, so when I started teaching at Commonwealth in 1979 at the age of 12, this is true, the ceramic studio was on the 5th floor in 4 tiny rooms. Most likely, these were the rooms for the Irish maids who helped run these big houses and made very little money working long hours. There were 4 blue do-it-yourself plywood kick wheels advertised in the Whole Earth catalog. Do y'all remember that Whole Earth catalog? Yeah. So each one is as big as a garden shed, and there were 4 in a room, and you could barely walk between them. The 50-pound brick flywheel is kicked on the bottom, and rapidly, and it's attached to a pole that rotates the metal throwing wheel, and the seat looks like it came from a lawnmower and is about this far away. So this is my interview. Yeah, right. There was another tiny room for a kiln, and it should have been banned by the fire department. And then we wedged the clay in another room, and we had a deep sink in the last room that clogged up at least once a week and should have been banned by the Board of Health. Of course, things are pleasantly different now. Just as we do today, in 1979, I had to teach a class as part of my interview. It was Rusty Crump over there, the current printmaking and photography teacher, and now my dear friend, who took me up to the 5th floor and left me alone to teach 3 students. I had brought my own tools and an apron, prepared to teach a class about centering and demonstrating how to throw a simple pot on the wheel. There were at least 10 boxes of clay on the floor. All of them were hard as a rock. Every single one was like a concrete block, and there was no pretending, no faking it, and absolutely no way I could throw a pot. I did the only other thing I could think of, and that was to tell a few ceramics jokes while we sat at the wheel and looked at each other. I'm going to try these jokes. My spouse is really into making pottery, but to me it's just kiln time. Yeah. Well, nobody laughed back then, thank you. So the other one, what did Clint Eastwood say before firing up the ceramic bowl he made in pottery class? Kevin? No? Okay. Go ahead and bake my clay. Still no laughs, but a lot of groans, just like I'm hearing here. So at least I knew that they were still awake after that. I took a 50-pound block of gray stoneware and put it on the wheel. Okay, I said, thinking desperate times need desperate measures. I'm going to pretend to center a pot on the wheel. Hoisting myself up on the metal seat across from the wheel, I began to kick and pantomimed how to center the clay and talked about how important it was to start with an even cone. Well, you do know now that I'm very short, and I had to move forward to reach the kick wheel, and as I did that, the block of clay just kept moving down and down and down, and my body kept falling lower and lower. So this is very funny to all those students. So instead of an interview for Commonwealth School, it was like the Cirque du Soleil. So finally the clay fell, the wheel slowed down, and I pushed myself back into the seat. I felt a little like Lucille Ball in her famous chocolate factory skit, when she put the chocolates in her mouth as they stumbled by. So without thinking, you just have to do something. So I, without thinking, said, okay, any questions? Thankfully, Miles Davis asked a question. This is not his real name, but he still comes to reunions, and I don't want Janetta to think that he's not coming or giving any money. So Miles Davis says, let's say the potter's wheel is on the ceiling, and it's attached, and if you stick some clay on there, You can center the pot upside down, can't you? And how do you consider the velocity and the gravity? I said, well, first you have to consider the water coming down, and you put a plastic bag on yourself, and that's how it would start. So, of course, what an idiot. The kid said, okay, let's try it. And thankfully, the bell rang. So, but I just want to say one thing. When I saw it and heard this thing and saw this kid going through those stuff, I said, who are these kids? What are these kids? Anyway, you grew up. So foolishly, I again said, well, let's do that when you come back next year. And I was so glad because they were all seniors and nobody came back. But, there was one thing. When the bell rang, I did realize something that every teacher should know and remember, that there's always a bell that rings. That's become my teaching motto. So moving along. 10 years ago, I began to make and exhibit artist books, an art form that began in Paris, in the avant-garde Paris, I should say around 1900. More than any other contemporary art, artist books are valued purely on the strength of the content, structure, and message. Teaching artist books, frankly, gave my teaching a much needed vitality after 30-odd years. The course is taught as a workshop class with 12 of us sitting around a table. We exchange ideas, materials, food, different techniques, and talking is encouraged, unlike a lot of other, art classes maybe. So this is as democratic as art ever gets. You can see from some of these things that they're pretty amazing. So I spent the first 2 months teaching kids how to use a variety of materials. Using printing techniques, gouache, oil, a whole different bunch of kinds of paint, very simple bookbinding processes, and going through the trash. And you've seen that model, that figure wearing the tutu, and she's paper mache'd with banned books. So that's how it becomes an artist book, actually. So we have become a compact community up there, a collective of artists helping one another. So it didn't matter if you were a sophomore or senior, everyone is engaged in sharing as well as exploring her own ideas. As a person who craves neatness and organization, I'm sometimes overwhelmed by the chaos in my artist books classes. But the artwork exhibited tonight is the opposite of chaotic. It shows that art engages students, brings triumphs and joys to others. Our artist books classes became a community of sorts, egalitarian, stubborn, and mindful of each other. It was like the pioneer days at Commonwealth School. Charles Merrill, the founder of Commonwealth, would say that he started the school in the city because he wanted students to learn to have a social responsibility within their community. Boston is an essential part of Commonwealth School. If you teach here, you can't escape it. Subtle or overt, we are collectively a part of the city. We're reminded daily that we're not just students and teachers inhabiting a brownstone on one of the world's most beautiful streets, but rather we're citizens of a wider world, and our participation is essential. It's the community that's kept me here. Being part of something lives outside myself. Every day at the end of daily announcements, Charles would quote Hillel. So instead of saying, have a nice day or make good choices, he would say, if I am not for myself, who is for me? And being for my own self, what am I? And if not now, when? I think that Charles built his school around this quotation. It could have been called Hillel School. And the ethic of reciprocity continues to live on. For 36 years, I've tried to balance the pursuit of self-interest with service to others. And it's not as easy as I thought it would be, but the reward has been greater than I ever imagined. Thank you. Thank you.